Hello and welcome back to the Stationary Dev, and we have once again another ink review. Now this is not a new ink for me, it's one that I've had in my collection for years now, but it's one that I haven't done on the channel, but I've mentioned this brand before because one of these inks is in my top 3 inks of all time, in terms of favorite inks. And so we are talking about Scribo inks. Scribo Fill the Writing, which you probably know them mostly for their pens. They make really great pens like the Fill, and I think the Puma is one of them. And but we're talking today about their fountain pen ink, and I think I'll go ahead and put it out there. I think Scribo is probably one of, if not the most underrated ink makers or ink lines out there. Because you never hear anybody talking about their inks, but they're all fantastic. They come in these, typical Scribo boxes that sort of their kind of typical colors and cardboard. Same thing you receive their pens in. Has this cool little sleeve that has the color. So this is going to be Grigio Scribo, so it's sort of their gray, so it's Scribo gray ink. What you can see is the color of all their boxes and branding and stuff like that. So it's their sort of signature or their company color. It comes in a giant 90 milliliter bottle, which is one of the biggest, I think it's probably the biggest sort of standard ink bottle that I've seen out there. So a full 3 ounces of ink, and we'll take a look at that. But really nice presentation. You slide off that, and you have a little pull tab here. That's sort of like a leather, fake leather kind of material. You pull it out, and the ink is inside in some foam. And you also get a little blurb on Scribo. That is all in Italian, but then there you go in English. So talks a little bit about them and their inks and the company. I've really been impressed with, I had the pen from them that I loved so much, and their inks I love even more. So we're going to cover that today. This is what the ink bottles look like. So they're in these big 90 milliliter bottles. Half of it, and these are murder weapons. This is really, really heavy. It's a giant solid chunk of glass. So it looks really good sitting on your desk. I think the label is really simple. It's sort of, you can't tell, but it's sort of kind of almost embossed in there. And it does have a really accurate representation of the ink color. So I'm not sure if they actually swabbed the ink there. But that's actually really, really an exact match for the darker bit of the ink. It's 90 milliliters. Comes with a little bow on it, kind of like the Iroshizuku bottles. And these are actually stackable. So if you have a couple of them, you can stack them on top of each other. And they actually fit very securely because the lid from the bottom one fits in this little cutout of this one. So you can stack a couple of them if you wanted to on your desk or in the corner, somewhere. It's not super stable, but it's pretty stable where it's not going to fall over or anything. So that's kind of neat, even though they're gigantic bottles. 90 milliliters of ink is insane. I'm never going to use this up. It's kind of cool that they make it usable and they make it look great on your desk and stuff like that. And there's actually a story behind these bottles. They're actually jam jars. I saw a video interview with the owner of Scribo, and he was talking about he was eating at a cafe or something like that, and they brought him some jam for his breakfast, and it was in this bottle. And he asked them where they got the bottles from, and that's what he ended up putting his inks in. And so that's why it has literally a jam jar cap. It has a little sort of Scribo emblem, that little feather quill with the matching ink color. Once again, a good representation of the actual color of the ink inside. And it's literally just a jam jar cap, but it does a good job of keeping the ink inside. And it's deep enough and wide enough that you can fit a pen in there, pretty much any pen that you want in there. So really cool bottles. really cool packaging and design, and it feels good, feels quality. This thing is sturdy, it's not going to break. I could probably knock this off my desk and it's going to be completely fine. You're not going to shatter. Like, that's thick glass. Like I said, murder weapon. It's got kind of a cool little bend to it too. So I just really like that. Usually I'm not much one for like crazy packaging, but I think they do a really good job in presenting their ink, and it's actually good ink, as we'll see. So in order to see that, I'm going to get a swab going in our Tomoe River paper. This is the old stock 68 gram Tomoe River paper. We can see it compared to Fuyu Shogun, which is my other favorite gray. Well, it's my favorite gray ink, but this one I think gives it a good run for its money and might take it over. We'll see. Because I actually haven't used, like I said, I've had this ink a while. I haven't used it a whole lot, but my love has been kindled for it because I retried it again recently, and it's a really good ink, like the other Scribo ink that I've used. But we'll give it a little swatch here, and you can see, compared to Fuyu Shogun, which is like I would call it like a purpley gray, this is very much more a blue / teal gray, teal leaning gray, blue black gray. I don't know what you want to call it. But that's kind of what it reminds me of. I'm going to swatch it on some Rhodia too, so we can do a writing sample on there and see how it looks. And then I'm going to cap this back up before we make too big of a mess. So yeah, really good, gigantic bottle of ink. I've had this inked up in my new Lamy Studio with the 14 karat gold nib, and it's been a very wet writer and felt really good in this pen. And it's a good one because even though this is an extra fine nib, it is very wet and very broad for an extra fine, so you can see the crazy good shading that this ink has. So this is Scribo Grigio Scribo. Scribo Gray. So it's their company color. When I bought my Scribo fill, the Scribo fill that I bought from them, I bought directly from them because it was an extremely limited edition pen, and they sent the pen with a little sample bottle of ink, and they also hand wrote a letter to go along with the pen, and the ink that they used in the letter was actually Scribo Gray. So it was all on brand, and it was really cool, and that's what actually got me to buy this ink when I went and bought the other ink that I like from them, which is Blue Cosmico. I was really going to buy a full bottle of that, but then I saw their letter that they wrote in this ink, and I just had to have a bottle of this one too because it was such a good looking ink in that letter. So while this one is drying, and you can kind of see how great of a color it is, we'll do a quick writing sample on the Rhodia 80 GSM, which is already pretty much dried. This is Scribo. In this pen, it starts off very wet, as you can see, but this is a very wet nib to start off of, so it's kind of hard to gauge the wetness or dryness of it. Let me do a quick writing sample. There you go. And I haven't had it dry up or stop writing in this pen or anything like that, clog up, anything at all. It's just been a really quality ink so far. Let's take a quicker look at it. So as you can see, it's very much on the border of a blue-black, but I'd still qualify it as a gray, as a blue leaning gray or a teal leaning gray. It's very readable. which I like. It's not too light to read. You don't have to strain your eyes to try to read it. And it doesn't come out too much in this light. Maybe I can change the lighting a little bit. And you can kind of see, like there on the wizards and stuff like that, you can see it has really, really, really good shading. So this is a shading ink that you would use for shading. You can see it on the F or the 5 there. Hopefully the color comes out well. We'll probably see it better on the Tomoe River paper. But really readable, really pleasant shade of gray. Let me get another sample. This is on Mitsubishi Bake paper, which is sadly discontinued. But really good paper, and you can see the shading a lot better there. On the sort of studio there, on the figure of 8s, on the hashes, on the ink name, just a massive sheening ink. Not sheening, shading. So it is not sheening at all. Even we'll see on the swab, it doesn't have any sheen at all. You're not going to get it to sheen. And I've wrote, this is a really wet pen, so I'd have seen it if it did have any sheen. But shading is off the charts on this one. This is a really, really, really nice shading ink. But shading in terms of you can still read it really easily, and it just looks good, looks cool on the paper. You can use this for businessy purposes. It's not too light or too weird. I think it goes, once again, it can kind of disguise itself as a blue-gray or blue-black, really. And here's a really good comparison between it and Fuyu Shogun. So once again, I'd say this is a lot more readable than Fuyu Shogun. Fuyu Shogun, you can see, is really purple. Compared to this, you can see is really blue or teal, blue-black, kind of leaning gray. But you can see the haloing in the more saturated parts, and you can see the shading from this sort of lighter pasteller color, more pastel color, over to these darker, moodier, cloudier kind of colors there. So really, really nice ink, and it's really worked well on everything that I've used it on. It hasn't bled through anything too much. You can see actually a little bit going down heavy, but once again, this is a really wet ink. Now, I tried this before. The reason why I didn't fall in love with it immediately when I first used it and why it sat for a while is because I originally had tried it in a TWSBI Eco with a stub nib that I had. That turns out, and the pen itself was a really dry writing Eco, and I had to do some work on it. But before I figured out that it was the pen's fault, I thought it was the ink's fault. So I thought this was a super dry ink, and it wasn't just, it wasn't working for me. It wasn't flowing well. Didn't feel good. It wasn't getting the good shading and stuff that I was looking for. But it turns out it was really the pen more than the ink. Now, that being said, this flows really good. I'd say it's right down the middle, maybe leaning just a hint on the dry side. Just like if, we were down the middle, it would just be slightly on the dry side, just barely. Because I do notice after, and once again, it might be the pen doing it, but after I write like maybe half a page or so, it does start to run a little bit drier in the pen. And once again, that might just be this pen that it's so wide and free flowing that it front loads it a lot. And then once the feed kind of runs out of ink, it kind of evens itself out and writes just a little bit drier. But other than that, it's never like stopped writing or felt horrible or anything like that. It's just the shading has gotten better or worse or depending. But really good ink. Now, in terms of the price, and this is where people probably might have a problem with it, is the price for 90 milliliters of ink, mind you, is between $30 and $40, which makes it a premium ink. But if you price per milliliter it is actually way cheaper than something like Iroshizuku or anything like that. If we're talking about the quantity of the ink that you get for the price and the quality of the ink, all of the Scribo inks that I've used and seen have been amazing. They have really, really cool colors. Like their ink colors are not just sort of straight blue, black, gray, red, green, whatever. They're really interesting colors, like this gray. It's not just a plain, gray color. It's really interesting. They're dark blue with the blue Cosmico. Is not just a regular blue. It's got sheen and like shading and really beautiful color. And they have some great reds. They have some good browns. And some good like teals and greens. So definitely I would recommend checking them out. I think they're underrated. You can get them at a lot of retailers. I saw Gold Spot, I think, and Applebaum, but you can find them at like Van Ness and some other places as well. So be on the lookout for some Scribo ink. I highly recommend it. Once again, this is going up with my top gray inks. I think Fuse Sogun is more classified as a gray. This one could pass as a blue-black if it really wanted to, but I think it falls in the gray sort of spectrum, so I'm going to keep it there. Yeah, I highly recommend it. So try out a Scribo ink. I think they're one of, if not the most underrated inks out there. Yeah, and it's worth it in every aspect for me. The packaging is beautiful. It looks good on your desk. It's gonna last you forever. You're not gonna have to buy bottles and bottles of this because it's 90 milliliters of ink. So unless you're just writing novels, you're gonna be set for a long time, and it's worth the price. It's durable. It's not gonna fall apart. Here's this compared to, it just dwarfs the Graphon Faber-Castell bottle. It absolutely dwarfs the Pelican 60 milliliter bottle. It's giant, but it's awesome. And so I highly recommend the Scribo Grigio ink. And then once again, Scribo Blue Cosmico is like my top 3 inks of all time. So highly recommend it there as well. I think I've covered everything I want to with this one. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave a comment below. I'll get back to you there. If you can, please leave a like and subscribe. Really helps out the channel and helps me out. I don't do this for a living, so it kind of helps keep me going as well. And until next time, I'll catch you guys later.